Hi everyone, this is Africa and Everywhere Conversations with Oge, and I'm your host, Oge Elumelu. And for today, we have an investor, award-winning conservationist, philanthropic advisor, an entrepreneur with over a decade of experience in collaborating with prominent institutions dedicated to large-scale growth and development initiatives in Africa. And I've been very excited to interview our guest today because I'm quite interested in the work she does. And so I knew it'd be a rich conversation, and I'm really happy to introduce Nela Duke-Ekpenyong. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for having me, Oge.
How are you feeling?
Very good. Very excited to be here.
Okay, good. So I can get into the first question. I wanted to ask you about your personal story behind why you're so interested in climate change and conservationism. And maybe you could explain to us what is conservation work.
So the reason why I'm so interested in sustainability and climate change was because growing up, when you're growing up, a lot of things that you're exposed to enters you subconsciously. So we always had pets, which, we discussed before, but we always had pets. I've had so many different bird species.
Birds?
A lot of birds. A lot of birds, bunnies, dogs. We used to go riding. So I've always been around animals. So there's always been a natural love for wildlife or just like life outside of being,
The house, I guess.
Yeah.
Nature.
And then on top of that, when we were younger, we'd go to the Obudu Mountains, which is in the northernmost part of Cross River State, and it's on the Swankwala mountain ridge, and on the east of it is Cameroon, and to the north of it is Benue State.
Okay.
So we used to go there a lot, and they have baboons, they have a lot of forests, they have a lot of endangered species like the Cross River gorilla. They have one of the largest concentration of poisonous snakes in Africa, so the green mamba is there, a lot of vipers, the cobra. There's a lot of different species. And then there also is a large bird population that lives there as well. And so you have people who used to come in from Greece and the United States and New Zealand and Switzerland to come and do bird watching. But as the years went by, because the area is so remote and because some of the infrastructure issues that Nigeria possesses, it got much more difficult to access. So then people wouldn't go as much, the infrastructure was poor, the community started to suffer. And that led to a lot of degradation in the forest, the wildlife, and the wildlands. And so when I went back there in 2013, it was shockingly different. I thought of that, and I think that was the first time I saw climate change like that in person and saw what the impact could be. And so that's what brought about my interest. But then what conservationists do is that we just support the protection, the species increase, the reduction of encroachment for wildlife and the wildlands in natural spaces. So it looks very different for different types of conservationists. Some are completely based on research, which we've done. Some are in the bush fighting the good fight, going against the poachers, etc., which we have a lot up there. That was the genesis. And then also because I live in Lagos, which is a very metropolitan city, I think that I was able to also see the impacts that climate technologies could have in a positive way for somewhere like Africa.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And so this is the work you do with Obudu Conservation Centre?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. So we'll come back to that a bit more. But I wanted to segue to the other work you do, so with Obudu Capital.
Yeah.
And before we get into that, maybe you could explain to people that might not be particularly familiar with how funds work. Can you break down simply what a fund is, and then what is it that Obudu Capital does that's different from traditional investment funds?
So I'll also say what sort of led to the creation
of Obudu
Capital. So as I said, I always had a natural love for wildlife, and I was always doing my research. I've been doing it since I was 19. And I was trained with professors and, other academics. But at the same time, I was working with family offices. I had also had investment experience running Harambeans, and then I work with the venture capital fund, a $50 million venture capital fund. But those were more sector agnostic. They were looking at different areas. And I found that each time I would be on the investing side doing due diligence, I was always more keen about the climate.
Right.
And so that eventually led to our family office seeding Obudu Capital to focus on climate technology investing in Africa, Nigeria, Ghana, Kenya, and Uganda. Okay. So those are the geographies that we focus on predominantly. And our teams are also spread across those regions. And so what a fund is it's a vehicle. So it's a vehicle, and in our case, so we're a $20 million fund. We have a vehicle set up in Mauritius, domiciled in Mauritius, and we raise capital from limited partners, which they call LPs. So we raise money from LPs, and then we invest that capital into climate technology companies that are early stage. So you have venture capital funds that invest, that can be agnostic, which means they invest across different sectors, fintech, health tech. I'm sure everyone's familiar with Flutterwave, Ubers of the world, exactly. So you have funds that invest in all of those different types of technologies, and then you have ones that are a bit more sector specific, which we are by nature.
So I find this quite interesting, and obviously you do as well, but I think a lot of people on a granular level might think, okay, climate change, why should I be so interested in that? Like, it doesn't actually affect me. Could you maybe explain to us how or why it should matter to the average African person?
Is because it impacts them directly. So if we look, or I'm going to just use Lagos as an example, but I think you can extrapolate that to many other African cities. But in Lagos, and again, if we look at the, Lagos city, the urban areas, when the flooding happens, that is not something that doesn't impact everyone here.
Exactly.
Or tall, short, it doesn't matter who you are, kids, it impacts everyone. People have lost their possessions, they've lost their homes, they lost their cars. So the millions and actually billions of dollars of damage that happens at scale when flooding happens in Lagos could be avoided, or at least could be mitigated, if we try to
be more adaptable
and focus on climate adaptation, right? So when and then also, I guess, in the rural areas, what I've seen is that because climate change is getting worse, people don't have steady weather patterns anymore. So it's not as predictable when it comes to farming, which then also affects our agriculture outputs, our yields, which of course makes its way back to the city. Prices increase. The ripple effects are just endless. And so even when it comes to like the price of fuel, if that's not able to be managed properly, it then also affects the logistics, which affects the food, which affects your pockets. So that's the angle I try to give when people ask, why should they care?
Let's say, okay, I'm convinced I want to help the environment more, but I'm a business owner and it just costs more for me to implement these more environmentally sustainable practices for my business, or perhaps it makes my operation costs like more expensive. So even though, sure, it might be helping me like in the long term, why should I, if it means that my operating costs are just now higher? Or are they not?
I don't actually think they are. So there might be that initial, shock factor of any investment. So if you, become completely solar dependent as like a business, right, and you look at the energy side, then, okay, the initial investment into that asset is there, but the price will reduce drastically. So example for me was that I have 2 cars, right? But I have kids, so it's also like I have to.
That I have to.
That's why I have to. And there's a point, but I have 2 cars, and the reason the second car I got was an electric vehicle car, because the first car,
in Lagos,
no,
in Nigeria.
Nigeria.
Okay, cool.
Was an EV vehicle, because the other car was consuming a freakishly amount of fuel, and it was causing a lot of money to refuel it every single day, because you're doing drop-offs for the kids, yourself, you're going to work, your husband's going here, like so it was a lot of money to refuel that car. So then we got an electric vehicle car, and it cost approximately, at least to get to 3/4 tank or charge, 25,000 naira versus the 16 to 19,000 naira, I think, every couple of days to refuel the car. Yeah, and that EV, it lasts for at least 4 days, 3 to 4 days before I have to top it up again. And this is of like driving far distances.
Right.
Yeah, but if I didn't drive that much, it would last over a week. So there is the initial shock again of like ever having to get a new asset, but after that, your prices do then come down drastically, and it becomes more sustainable.
Yeah. I guess people have to think more long term. Think, okay, well, this short term cost I'm incurring actually does have a long term benefit.
Exactly.
And I didn't know people had EVs in Nigeria. Just building on that, could you educate us what you think are some of the biggest threats to conservationism and also like climate adaptability?
I'd say in Africa specifically, some of the biggest threats, it's so multi-pronged, but if you're looking at just general pollution is obviously a huge threat. But if you're looking at like, one of the biggest issues we're having, which is we're losing our carbon sinks, our forests.
Yeah.
So that's the encroachment, the degradation, which is like the coming and chopping down the forests, yeah, and our mangroves or just our natural carbon sinks. And, because using it to get land or, to farm for agriculture or oil, yeah, using it to dredge up oil or whatever the reason may be. But I think that is the biggest issue that we're facing right now.
So you were talking about threats and you already touched on the issue of oil and like dredging for oil. And I think when we're talking about the environment and sustainability, in Africa particularly, oil and gas is a big one because of natural resources and that's what we have. So I wanted to ask you what your thoughts are on a sustainable energy transition, because we know that oil and gas and these fossil fuels help to power or like actually create a lot of power and fuel for the continent, but there is this push to transition. So as someone that's interested in that space and sustainability, what are your thoughts on this transition for a country that gained nearly 95% of its total energy supply from fossil fuels?
So, and I really like this question, by the way. It's such a fantastic question. So what I would say to that is that it's like almost two-pronged. So first of all, yes, I mean, on the surface, yes, we have 95% of our energy is coming from fossil fuels. Yes. But then if you look deeper, people who actually have access to energy it's much lower than that, right? So if you're saying that, all of our energy is coming from this place, we don't even have, a lot of the population doesn't even have the access to energy, point period. Forget where it's coming from. And so when you're looking at the energy transition, it's a conversation between energy transition and also energy access. So if you're able to look at both simultaneously, if let's say a community doesn't even have the energy to begin with, what energy are you going to introduce on a governmental level, right? And when you're doing this energy transition, you've seen it in the West, we've seen it in some African countries. South Africa's doing a good job of how they're able to, yes, support, like have the fuel, but also looking at other alternatives and introducing that through regulation and incentivizing it simultaneously. So a lot of things have to happen at once. I actually would say that there is some level of fortune of the fact that we're not as deep, we're not the United States in that way, whereas like everyone is reliant on this particular kind of energy. We actually can start afresh more so than the West could have.
Since access is so limited.
It's so limited. It's so limited. People really take it for granted in the cities.
Interesting. Yeah, I actually don't think of, I've never made that distinction, like actually thinking about, okay, we're looking at, well, the majority of our demand does come from fossil fuels, but what is the access?
What is the access to that fossil fuel? So I'll say like even the Obudu region itself, there's no electricity there. There's actually no electricity. So typically what the people do there is that they'll burn the firewood, which is not great because they are cutting down the trees and then they're burning the firewood and that has negative impacts on them as a community. But then in that case, it's now the question is, okay, how do we transition them to these sustainable stoves? Those cooking stoves, and how do we introduce maybe solar powered innovation, but they have nothing there. So like, how do we actually start? That then becomes the question.
I was going to ask about that, because do you think it's more of a bottom-up approach and like people, like groups should just start their own initiatives, if you will, or okay, all that as well, but more so we actually need government like support for that, let's say, like provision of these clean cooking stoves? So
I think there's a PPP, a public-private partnership model that can be successful, in my opinion, just being realistic to the context of Africa. But ideally, and there's a text I read, it was written by Professor John Oates, but essentially he was arguing that long-term economic progress, economic community progress cannot be met from the bottom up. So you see like a lot of, when you look at impact things, they're always like, let's go into the local community, let's empower them. But it's very much dependent on the community, it's very much dependent on one, the community, two, the organization or international organization, the individuals who are, setting those mandates on a local or community level. And when those, or if they do leave, everyone is going to revert back to the status quo. Whereas if you start from the top down and you have regulations, you have deterrence, you have laws, you have policies, you have different agencies and players who are bought into the vision and accountable for that vision, then it becomes sustainable, because that's how it gets passed down from generation to generation, and then it becomes just a way of being as opposed to just something we're introducing to look cute into a local community.
Really to look cute, yeah. No, but thank you very much for answering that. My next question, so going back to Obudu Capital, so we know that your fund is trying to tackle these different climate threats and climate crisis issues. Could you please share examples of some companies or a company that you have invested in, and what specifically excites you about the way they conduct their business?
So one of the companies we invested in is called Rare Soil. It's a Kenyan-based company. And what they are is that they are an agriculture technology company that has created this technology that's able to measure the soil nutrients. Because a lot of the time farmers, large-scale farmers, small-scale farmers, they are buying fertilizer like their life depends on it. But that might not actually be the issue with the land, with the plants, with their yield, etc. So once they have that technology, it tells them exactly what's wrong with the soil, and maybe it's just nitrogen deficient, just what minerals it's needed to optimize the yield of the harvest or the crops, and that then has long-term effects on the farmers. One, their soil isn't being pumped full of things where it in the end ends up losing more nutrients than it's needed. It's more targeted. And then two, it helps save money for the farmers. So if you're buying, let's say, a $10 bag of fertilizer, they don't cost that much, but like it was the tape, or I think they cost more, but like the $10 bag of fertilizer, and you just sort of like, throwing it across the land. If you find out that you just actually, it's like a nitrogen issue, or something very specific, or there's a disease, or there's a pest that's going on with your crops, you could just then spend $2
because it's more targeted.
To rectify that. And so what makes me more excited about that company is not just the fact that they are able to support farmers in that way, but it's the data. So they're being able to collect data from farmlands, not just in Kenya, but also in Tanzania and beyond, and in East Africa. And that then can in the future be supporting, the World Seed Organization. So it can just change the landscape of how we're able to understand farming in an area such as Africa, where 60% of our land is arable. Right. So it's a major business. I know farming isn't sexy.
No, but it is the majority of, I'm pretty sure the majority of, even if not youth employment, actually on the continent, agriculture. It's agriculture. So it is a big thing.
It's a big deal. And also when I know a few of like the very, very wealthy entrepreneurs I've met in Africa, like a lot of them are in farming.
Yeah.
Different types of farming, but they're all in farming, or they have farmlands, etc. So I do want to take away that stigma where it's like, oh, it's just farming. It's like, cool. No, it's cool.
It's very cool. Okay, thank you.
But I also will say, like, when we look at where we do invest in agriculture, waste management, energy. Energy, climate finance, so like carbon credits, carbon credit technologies, infrastructure, so mobility, EV, etc., and then health and biotechnology and health, because we're looking at the entire flywheel of climate adaptation and climate mitigation. And health is obviously one that's obviously impacted as a result of climate change in Africa.
So another way you are impacting the environment beyond Obudu Capital is, as we touched on, Obudu Conservation Centre. And I actually remember when I was younger, so because I follow you and your sisters obviously. And you guys would post that from time to time, like when you'd go to the conservation center. And it's like, oh, like it looks so pretty in Calabar. And like, oh, I want to visit, like climb on the mountain or whatever. So yeah, I've always just thought it was such a cool concept. And to know that, well, you started the conservation center, right? And I wanted to ask, what led you to starting it? I know you said you've always had this interest in like sustainability and wildlife and conservation work, but when did you actually think, okay, I want to actually make this an official thing?
Yeah.
And what have been your proudest achievements with the conservation center so far?
Thank you.
No problem.
So it was actually like initially seeded, or this the idea was my mom's, but she had the idea of just doing education for the local community.
Oh, nice.
And so when I went back in 2013 and I saw that the lands were actually gone and the animals are gone too, I thought that, you know, I don't feel as though people who live there have an education gap issue. And also talking to them, they know far more about, like, they can do the bird calls and the bird will come. They can.
That's amazing.
It's so cool. It's so incredible.
I need to come.
And so the education wasn't really the issue. It was more so, how do we, what is a stopgap so they can be economically, sustainable and also protect the environment? Because you find that a lot of communities that actually live within wildlife, they have a reverence and respect for the natural world.
Right.
They have it because that's their home.
Exactly.
But then, if you need to chop down the wood to cook your food, you're going to chop down.
Yeah,
You're going to chop down that wood. So that was then, so in 2013, also the operations of the education of what she was doing completely halted. So that's when it was Obudu Conservation Educational Centre previously, and then I rebranded. So refounded it. I don't know if that's the word. And we now focus on wildlife and species protection.
And how old were you when you started this?
I was 22.
Okay.
Yeah, 22. But formally 22, but then I started looking into it from when I was 19.
That's so impressive.
Thank you. Like it was very much just a passion, or just something that called to me. It just made sense to me. And I'm sure most people who've had a calling,
their own thing,
can appreciate that. And some of the proudest things that we've been able to do is, one, we started our own forest reserve. So we have our own forest patch that we're protecting, and that's called the Women Woodlot Reserve up on the ranch. And then we were also able to rediscover a species that was thought to be extinct in the region. Yeah. So the Franciscan monkey, which most of my research and team's research has been on, it was thought to be completely extinct on the Obudu region. But from the work that we were doing, so this is a really full circle moment. The work we were doing to protect that forest when we started the reserve in 2017, and they stopped, chopping down the wood, and it was completely protected. The monkeys were able to come back and migrate back into their natural habitat, and we also were able to be the first ones to capture it on camera. So it had never been seen on camera before. So we were able to do that, which is really exciting.
Yeah. No, that must have been so rewarding as well.
It was so rewarding. I felt like a real scientist. Half the time you have that imposter syndrome when you're doing things. I'm not classically trained. I didn't go to...
What did you study?
International relations and politics.
Okay. I thought you were going to say biodiversity.
Nothing about it. Nothing. Nothing. Completely self-taught. Completely self-taught.
That's amazing.
And I've been surrounded by phenomenal mentors. But yeah, that one was, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm a real, maybe I'm a big scientist now.
Yeah.
Found a species.
But I guess there's a lesson there that you don't always have to be, no shade to people that are formally trained. That's great. But you don't always have to be formally trained. You can educate and research yourself.
I think so, yeah. I think both in Obudu Conservation Centre, both in Obudu Capital, there has been, anything in finance. Finance does have a apprenticeship model naturally. So I don't think anyone's going to school to learn investment banking or
asset management.
Yeah, you go into it and you learn on the job. You do the internship, you become analyst, and then so it's an apprenticeship model. But I think that reminded me that anything can be learned, and anything can be learned. I also think that the world has shifted from this very dogmatic way of viewing things where you have to go to school and become like the lawyer, and
Then
that's the only way to. I mean, there's certain, if you're a doctor,
go to school.
go to school, be a doctor, go to school and please be that doctor in the school, please. But yeah, if you're out in the bush, you can start moving.
Yeah. Okay. No, fair enough. Thank you. And something I like to ask all my guests. So we're wrapping up now, sadly. But I always like to ask for advice. I guess that one of my advice that an interviewee or one of my guests would give to people listening. So particularly like young Africans that are maybe interested in this industry that you work in. So for you, obviously there's the finance angle, but also like the conservation angle. So yeah, what advice would you give maybe to young entrepreneurs that are trying to grow maybe in either space?
I would say get comfortable doing the things you don't like, and that doesn't mean like suffer or you know, it just means that I think we are in an age where like there's a lot of comfort. You know, we're sitting inside right now, and there's AC blowing, and you know, there's water right next to me, and so people have become slightly adverse to discomfort, and just the idea of keep going, and so being uncomfortable, being uncomfortable is something that I had to really get used to, because I was doing things that I was out of my depth. I was doing research on things that I did not.
You weren't trained.
I was not trained to do. When it came to investing, obviously, like I worked in the funds, I got the apprenticeship model, but even through that, you're learning on the go, you're making mistakes, you're refining your process, and being comfortable, being uncomfortable allowed me to overcome the obstacles. And then also finding a great team. That is the other thing, is finding a great team. So I guess on the fund side, we're each specialized in our individual things. So when it comes to, you know, we have a head of investments, Nabira, who really spearheads that. She's done over 56 deals in Africa in climate technology.
Amazing.
We have Gladys, we have Ryan, whose main thing is systems operations. Like he went to Harvard just to like for that. And he helps companies scale. We have me, obviously I do the investing, but also supporting founders with their storytelling, with their fundraising efforts, etc. So like having people who compliment you and knowing that you don't have to be exactly like the person next to you, and appreciating them and letting them do their own thing, and meeting back in the middle is something that I would also advise founders to be able to do. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed this conversation. And I hope you did too.
Me too, I did.
Thank you. Hi everyone. Thanks so much for listening to this interview with Nela Duke-Ekpenyong. I really hope you've enjoyed it. We touched on things from her work with Obudu Capital and also Obudu Conservation Centre, and just climate change, climate adaptability and conservation work in Africa. So please make sure to like this video, comment, subscribe, follow us on our Instagram page, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. And yeah, we'll be back with another interview soon. So thanks so much.